Hey everyone, my name is Andrew. I'm a second year student registered nurse anesthetist, and I'm making this video because I've had a lot of classmates ask me for help getting started with ANKI or making the transition or just optimizing their settings. So I figured it would be easiest to just make a video where I explain everything, where people can, go forward, pause, rewind. And also, I think this would be helpful for new students coming in or that just started anesthesia school. When I talk to incoming students, prospective students, I try to encourage them to experiment with different methods when they start out. So, if you have something that's already working for you, you might just want to stick with that, honestly. This method is good for improving your efficiency, um, and making sure you get through everything. And I think it's really helpful, especially when clinicals start, to just have a daily goal that if I meet that goal, then I'm keeping up with my studying. So first, couple disclaimers. I'm just some guy on the internet. I'm not an Anki expert. I'm self-taught on everything. So I'm sure there are people out there that know more about this than I do. I may explain things incorrectly, so please correct me in the comments if that is the case. And if you have tips or maybe something I could be doing better or, whatever, just put it in the comments so people watching in the future can also benefit from that. And second of all, just I would not make the switch to this if you already have something that works, unless you know getting into it that the key is starting early with your reviews, and you have to allow time for that to happen before exams. So we'll get into all that. At its root, Anki is just a flashcard scheduler and an interface for making and reviewing the flashcards. It's helpful because you can do it on your iPad, on your phone, on your laptop, but try to think of it as a system that schedules flashcards based on how you reply to your answer. And the efficacy of it is contingent upon your ability to answer um, and assess how you answered correctly. So if you lie to the algorithm or you overestimate, underestimate your ability to recall these things, it's going to affect how well this app works for you. On that note, especially in anesthesia school, you need to both comprehend and recall information. Sometimes you can get away with one or the other, but to be successful, especially in a comprehensive sense, you need to understand what you're recalling. And Anki is primarily a recall tool. However, you can use it while you're making cards to comprehend while making this material for you to work on recalling it. But just don't assume that if you can recall things that you fully understand them. You have to be constantly assessing yourself if you understand it or if you're just remembering a fact or something. And when each of those instances is desirable. So next on this outline, some key principles. I think the most important part of using Anki is you have to start early with your reviews and you have to make sure you're completing your scheduled cards every day. You may have a day here or there where you just don't get through them all, but more often than not, you need to be getting through everything that's due for the day so you can stay on track. Um, as I mentioned earlier, you have to be honest with yourself when you're answering cards and grading how you recalled it, and you need to set realistic goals. Reasonable card number. If you have too many cards, you're not going to get through them, and it's going to discourage you, and you're just going to start lagging behind. So it's better to set smaller chunks that you can get through to kind of encourage you to continue getting through your cards. And on that note, that's why you have to start early. I make my cards during class, and I'm trying to get through them all the day or two after the class where I made those cards. Um, in an ideal scenario, I've been doing my cards for 2 to 3, maybe 4 weeks by the time we have an exam. You have to allow time for yourself to start forgetting stuff a little bit to really increase the difficulty in recalling that information because that's what locks it in when it comes to finals. Be familiar with the settings. If you're having issues, type it into Google or something and see there's usually a video or a thread somewhere on people that had that issue and how they adjusted their settings. And go into the settings as we're going to do and see what they actually do to the cards. I think that's the hardest part when you're starting out is you kind of know what you want to happen, but it's kind of hard to know exactly what settings have what effects. And finally, some of the benefits for Anki for me personally is it decreases the average study time. We'll look at the stats later, but on average, I am doing 300 something cards a day and usually averaging 2-ish hours. Now, there are days where I can only do 30 minutes, and there are days where I might do 5 or 6 hours of cards. But on average, it is less time than just sitting and rewriting study guides, which I don't think is that helpful, especially once clinicals start, because you're just so tired when you get home that you're not actually that active in your studying, in my opinion. If you're just rereading or writing things, you're just kind of going through the motions. At least that's how it was when that's what I was doing initially. And also, it lets you do, I'm calling it micro studying. You can get through cards standing in line at a restaurant or at the gym. I can usually get through 100 or so um, using my iPad on the treadmill. So you can get your exercise in while you're doing your cards. And I think the most important thing, and what I think should drive most people to make the switch if they want to, is I did not study for finals at all last fall, which was like our first um, fully involved anesthesia term. I just did my cards for the upcoming exam, changed my settings for more long-term retrieval and recall, and I just did what was scheduled each day. It was usually maybe 20 to 40 to 50 at the most cards on old topics. And I did not do any additional studying for finals. I just did the cards that were due. And I did not have to, I didn't even open up old PowerPoints or anything. So it's able to, you're able to just do a small bit each day to retain this information for a longer period of time. And it just really increases your efficiency, which is what you really need to be doing during anesthesia school. Okay, so now we're in the Anki app. Make sure you get the latest download from the website, and I do recommend buying the mobile app. And first, we're just going to go over some of the basics. So, right here, you can see I've already studied 112 cars today in 35 minutes. I did that just on the treadmill at the gym earlier. And you can see up here, this takes you to your decks, which is the screen we're on here. Add, this lets you browse your cards. This shows you your stats, and we'll kind of go over this at the end. And then here's the sync button, and I just kind of hit that anytime I'm back on this screen here. So first thing we'll discuss is what's the difference between a note and a card. A note is a more umbrella term that will have various cards within it. And as I show you how we make cards, this will make more sense. But the note, just remember that a note can have cards within it. You might have one note and one card, but you may have one note that has maybe six associated cards, and that will make sense once I start showing you how to make cards. Um, I use three main types of cards. I use the basic, the closed deletions, and image occlusions. Um, 95 maybe percent of my cards are image occlusions. And then as I encounter topics that I don't fully understand or want to make sure I'm really memorizing, I'll make closed and basic cards. Basic card is a simple flash card front back. You can have simple and then reverse basic cards. A reverse is where you may be presented with either the front or the back. But it's just a simple basic card. You have a front, and then you'll hit the space bar, and it'll show you the back, and then you'll judge whether how well you answered that question. Closed deletion is where you will give. Let's see if I can find one, like right here. This is a um, string of text, and then you will pick certain parts that you want to be hidden behind three dots, and I'll show you that once we make some cards. And this is nice for just memorizing simple facts without the pitfall of memorizing where something's located on a slide. So these are really well. I use these a lot for from the readings. If I'm trying to understand something, I'll copy paste text and then delete certain words. That'll help me memorize that. And then image occlusions, this is the bulk of what I use. This is where I start, is just you can upload a slide from class and then draw little shapes over certain things you want to have covered up. And then you'll be presented that with a red box over it. Click the space bar after you try and recite what's behind it, and then you judge how well you recalled that. So next, we're going to talk about how I organize my decks. So I organize by class. So this is my main deck here. I have Advanced Farm and APP1. Okay, so under Advanced Farm, I organize by my exams. Okay, and then each exam, will be further divided into subdecks based on topics, based on what was lectured on that day. The reason I do this is sometimes the schedule will change and we may move inhaled agents from this exam to the next exam. And it's just a simple, you just drag and drop it there. And you don't have to go digging for those specific cards if something happens. So this is more just for convenience if the exams change, because I recommend going through your cards in the broadest categories possible so you have different topics mixed in together. Okay, now let's talk about my strategies for deck presets. So I have three presets that I use. We have, you can see them up here in your settings. I have the exam after next, the general deck long term, and then the upcoming exam short term deck. I just need to delete this one. So if the exam is upcoming exam, like the deck says here, I will use this one. This is a short term with a max interval of 7 to 10 days, I think. And this is ensuring that I'm seeing stuff frequently enough to keep it fresh before the exam. Exam after next, I use this for content that we covered in class, but is on the exam after the next one that we're going to take. So this lets me just kind of start working ahead on those cards, but you could honestly skip this one. I don't think it's that necessary. It's just if you want to get ahead on cards, you can use it, but I don't really find myself doing it that much, honestly. And then the general deck long-term preset. This is used for when, and we'll kind of discuss this, 3 or 4 days before an exam, when everything is in the upcoming exam preset, I will switch to the general deck long term. And what this preset has is much longer intervals than the upcoming exam. And it lets me on my last run through of the cards schedule a more significant interval for long-term memory retention for the final. And it prevents me from having a massive backlog after the exam of cards for an exam you took the day before, because you really don't want to work through those. And I purposely did that after this exam to show you how to avoid doing that. So these are the three presets I use. You honestly could get by with just a short term and a long term preset. And I honestly kind of just suggest doing that because it's more simple. So how do you make a preset? So you make the settings. So I'm going to show you, we're in my upcoming exam short-term deck. So new cards, 9999. Maximum reviews, 9999. New cards, 5 minutes, 30 minutes for lapses. Random, mixed, difficult cards first. 97 because it's for my upcoming exam. And leave this the same. And my maximum interval is 10 days. I would suggest anywhere from 7 to 14 days for this, as long as you're keeping up with your cards. If you don't start your new cards until like a few days before the exam, this is not going to work for you. Okay, you got to start this as soon as you make the cards. So I leave it at 10 with a 92% retention. And if you find out that you're getting through your cards super easily in a day, then turn this up and make it harder. So this is my short-term deck here. So after you make all these settings, it's important to save it. So what you do is come over here and you hit add preset. I'm not going to click on it because I already made it. And then you would hit save and title it short term. Okay. So we just took this exam here, and these are all already switched over to general long term. But for this exam, I made this deck yesterday and it automatically makes it my default. But what I'm going to do is switch these to upcoming. Hit save, here to upcoming, hit save. And then I'm just going to also change the main deck to upcoming and hit save. This is why it's important to always just check the settings in your subdecks, because you might change this one and forget these and your settings will be all messed up. But we took exam 2 yesterday. So now all of my exam 1 and exam 2 subdecks are in the general long-term deck preset. And then we have exam 3 coming up, and these are all coming. Okay. So the reason I change to general right before the exam is to avoid what's happening right here. So I purposely did this to show you what happens. I left exam two all in upcoming exam preset until the day of the exam. And what happened is I now have 300 cards due on an exam I took yesterday, and I really don't want to do that. So I'm going to show you what happens when you reschedule with FSRS. So we've already switched to the general long-term deck. I'm going to evaluate. I don't know what that means, but I'm going to hit optimize and you'll see it change some of these numbers. Now, if you remember, I had 300 cards due today. We're going to reschedule based on those findings. And see here, it's telling you this is going to change up your scheduling. And let's see what happened. Hit save. And this reduced it from 300 down to 150. Okay, so this is why you do not hit the rescheduling with FSRS right before an exam. Okay, because I might have wanted to do those 300 cards the day before the exam, but just changed all my scheduling. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Um, and I'll just show you the settings I use for the general long-term preset so you can make one of those for yourself, or at least have an idea where to start. So general deck, 9999, 9999, always leave it there. This doesn't matter because you should not have new cards in your long-term deck. Lapse is 10 minutes. I just reduced this compared to the upcoming one because this is content I haven't reviewed in a while, perhaps. So I might need more frequency when I'm relearning it if I forgot it. Leave this all the same as the short-term deck. And here I reduce my retention down to 90% because my philosophy on this is your final exam is not going to be typically tested in the detail that the um, your smaller exams are because there's just so much that they're trying to cover that if you really don't need to know 97% of the stuff. If you're getting the broad strokes, you're going to be fine. So I put that at 90. Um, leave all this the same. I adjust this based on what your schedule looks like. And this is kind of where the major changes are. I increased my maximum interval to 30 days and this retention down to 90% here. So now, if I answer a question and I keep answering it correctly, I'm going to see it every 30 days. And in my experience, that is enough to retain that information for the purposes of finals, as long as you're doing it and as long as you're not lying to yourself about knowing it or not knowing it. So that is my general long-term deck, and we have the short-term deck. And briefly, use the short term for upcoming exams, and about 3 to 4 days before that exam, switch to your general deck so you can start rescheduling, and then leave everything in your general deck after you take the exam, and that should be sufficient to keep you prepared for your finals. Okay, now we're going to talk about making cards. I make all of my image occlusion cards during class. I make closed deletion cards when I do the readings or if I need to understand something better, and the same with basic cards. So what we're going to do is make a test deck here. We're going to hit create deck and we're just going to call it test right here. So this is our general deck. And then what we're going to do is make an exam one under here. So you put two colons and say exam one. And then you'll see now here you have exam one. So I click on that, go back to decks, and let's make a subdeck on the topic of point of care ultrasound. Okay, so you can see how I made my general deck for the class. We have exam one and then our subdeck for focus. Now let's make sure our settings are correct. So we're going to hit option and we're going to hit upcoming exam. And we're going to make sure that all of these subdecks have the same settings. Okay. My general workflow for this is during class, I'll pull up ANKI on the left side, like we have over here, and I'll pull up the slides on the right side. Now, these slides are from a presentation I gave in class, and so they are my own slides, and some of the pictures are from showmethepocus.com, and they're cited in the slides. So this is not from faculty or anything like that. It's my own IP. So I'm just going to take you through how I make cards during class for image occlusion. So let's click on the smallest deck because we're doing the topic is POCUS. We're going to hit add. And this brings you to the first time you see it, this is kind of a scary screen because you don't really know what's going on. So first thing is we want to pick the type of card we're making. I pick image occlusion with all the pluses. I don't know what difference that makes, but it seems like the best option. And before class starts, make sure you have the right subdeck up here in the corner, test, class, exam one, and the POCUS topic to make sure you're putting stuff where you want it to be. Okay, and you're now set up to follow along with the lecture and make your cards as you go. So this slide comes up, I'm following the professor, and what I'm going to do is hit Command Shift 4 on my keyboard. That allows me to take a screenshot. I come down here, I two-finger click, I hit Save to Clipboard, and then I hit Paste Images from Clipboard. Okay, so now we're over here and able to make our occlusions. Okay, so you just kind of want to pick words that don't occlude the whole slide at first. Pick small things to memorize, and then as you start reviewing and it becomes easier, then you can increase the size of your occlusions. Okay, so the probe emits an ultrasound wave, and it displays the signals that are returned to it. So we'll block that out. That'll help us remember that. The signal is produced by the crystals. So that'll help us remember what makes the signals. Followed by a pause. That's kind of all self-explanatory. And what stimulates the crystals? The reflected signals and produce a current is interpreted and displayed by the machine. Okay, so remember how we discussed the difference between notes and cards? Right now, this is one note, and each of these occlusions is a separate card. Okay, so if we were to hit add right now, each one of these occlusions will be a separate card. So it'll show us this one and this one and this one. The thing is, you don't want three cards out of this because that's three cards too many. You can make this one card, one note. Okay, so how we're going to do that is we're going to group all three of these occlusions together. You can do that by clicking up here to this button, which is the select button, as you can see here, instead of the shape one. Or on your keyboard, you can hit S and you'll see it changed up here. We're going to drag over these, and you can see that these are now all selected. Okay, now the important part right now is we want to group these together. You can do that by either hitting this button, or as you see on the screen there, you can hit G, and you'll see how this changes here. Okay, so these are now grouped together. So we now have one note and one card, which is all of these occlusions as one single one. Okay. So now that we made that, you can hit add, but it's also faster when you're in class is you hit the command button on Mac and then enter, and it's a shortcut to add it so you don't have to use your mouse. Okay, so the professor just moved on to our next slide. We're going to hit Command Shift 4. I'm going to take a screenshot of that, two-finger click, save to keyboard, paste, and here we are again. So we come down here and we can see we have this picture with some labels here. This is a nice example of how I do these sorts of cards here is we'll occlude the definitions, and what we can do is you can either leave this as four separate occlusions or you can hit S, select the top two, G to group them, come down, select those two, G to group them, and now we have two occlusions, two cards of this one note. Okay. Say we want to undo that. Select that. You hit this button here to ungroup them, or you can use the shortcut U. And now we are back to these being separate. We can also make all four of them an occlusion. Okay. Now, what another thing we can do, if you want to switch it up, is we hit the R button or we click here. But I'm going to hit R, switches me over here. And I'm going to cover up the labels here. So you can see this is an occlusion and this is an occlusion. This button right here is the mode of your image occlusion. So right now, when this card's presented to us when we're reviewing, these will all be covered up. What you can do is switch this from either hide all guess one to hide one guess one. So we will see when the card's presented to us, we will see this and this will be occluded. And then on the second card, we will see this and this will be occluded. Okay, that's all that does. If you want to make a circle, you can do that. You can make other weird shapes and type in text if you want to. The reason I do screenshots over here instead of turning this whole thing into a PDF is because if I need to make a change, I can type up here if I need more context on the slide. Okay. If I want to get rid of this, I can just do that and delete that. We'll leave it like this. I'm going to hit Command Enter and we added the card. Okay. This is another option, and this is kind of where I'm going to teach you how to do close deletions. So mess with doing your image occlusions. I do these almost every slide of the deck during lecture, unless it's information I don't really think we need to know. But so let's say the professor just said 1 megahertz is equal to 1 million hertz, and they repeated themselves a couple times. So I think that's pretty important. What I'm going to do is Command C, copy this little note that I typed down there, come over here, change it to close, and now we're in the close deletion mode. Okay, so Command V to paste that statement into here. Like we mentioned earlier, a close deletion is where you'll replace a portion of text with 3 dots, and you will then, when you're reviewing it, guess what is behind it. So the best way to do a statement like this is we're going to highlight this fact. We're going to use the shortcut Command Shift C at the same time. Okay. And we have now put that statement within the closed symbols here. Now, we also are going to highlight this Command Shift C. Okay. As you can see here, this says C1 and C2. What this is telling us is we're making 2 cards. Okay. So when we go to see this, and I'll show you here in a second what this is going to look like, we're going to be shown this, and guess what this is, or we will be shown what this is, and guess what this is. Okay. So we're going to hit Command Enter, and we're going to put the same thing in, and I'm going to show you how else this can work. And in this instance, you wouldn't do it like this, but we'll highlight this and hit Command Shift C, and we've made that a C1. And let's hit this, and we're going to hit Command Shift Option C, and this is C1. Okay. So if you remember correctly, if we just hit Command Shift C, it's going to make this a 2 here. Okay, and it's not going to let us do that. So Command Shift Option C keeps the C1 the same as the first one. Every time you hit Command Shift C, it's going to add a number to this. So let's just say we type some stuff here. We hit Command Shift C, that's now C2. We type some more stuff here. Command Shift C, that's now C3. Okay, this will make sense in a second. But we leave both of these C1. Let's see what happens. So we're going to go back to our deck here and look at the cards we made. Okay. So take a second to think about what this one is. Half of it's occluded or closed, deleted, and the other half is not. So this is our C1 and this is our C2. Okay. Card 1, card 2, all the same note. Hit the space bar. There we go. And then we come down here and pick again, hard, good, easy, whatever. Okay. And then you can edit and see this was our C1 and our C2 card. Okay. So we're going to hit hard here. And this is what that image occlusion that we made 3 occlusions with in one group looks like. So you can see We drew three boxes, and because we selected them and hit G, they're all the same occlusion. So instead of having to do three cards, we'll just do this one. The probe emits an ultrasound wave, signals that are returned to it. Signal is produced by piezoelectric crystals, and these reflected signals stimulate the crystals. And there you go. And we got that right, so we're going to hit good. Now, what's going on here? Both of these are missing in a closed deletion. And if you remember correctly, we made one where both said C1. Okay. So that's what it looks like when it does that. That's not a helpful card because we have nothing to go with. That is why instead of C1 megahertz, C1, 1 million hertz, we want C1 and C2 here. Okay. And that's what it'll look like. We'll be given this, and then we can know that over here is 1 million hertz, hit space, boom, got it right. Now, this is a perfect example of what happens when you edit a card. When you edit a card, you are making a new card under that note, but the original card still exists. It's just now considered an empty card. So you'll get this to show up here. What you do is you want to suspend this card. Okay. So come down to more, hit suspend card. You can also use the shortcut of Shift 2, and you'll see that the card was suspended. You can find that card again by going to browse for that subdeck. You'll see it highlighted here as yellow, or you can go down here and it'll be in your list of all your suspended cards. Okay, and then I'll just briefly show you how to make a basic card. Just pick here, and you can type in, 2 plus 2 equals, and on the back say 4. Hit Command Enter to save it, and we can go back into our deck. 2 plus 2 equals 4. There you go. I mainly use basic cards for if I need to explain a process, like the front will say outline fibrinolysis or outline the platelet plug process. And then on the back, what I'll do is if that card comes up, I'll take out a piece of scratch paper, I'll write it out, and then I'll hit the space bar, see what's on the back of the card, and compare to see if I was close or not. I believe that is all the shortcuts. I would definitely, if you're an incoming student or you're just getting started, practice doing this with some old slides so you can get the shortcuts down, so you can keep up in class when you're making them. But I make all of these image occlusion cards during class, and that way, the day after class, I have content that I can start going over with, and that shows me the things that I understand and the things I don't understand. And then one last thing I'll show you for making cards is, so say this is a chapter in Miller. Say we're talking about inhaled anesthetics and I'm just not getting it. Go to the reading, do the reading on that topic to try and understand it so you can comprehend and then work on recalling. So I like this paragraph here, but I want to remember what these numbers mean. So I'm going to copy it, Command C, come over here to add, and we're going to make a closed deletion card with this. So paste it in here. The formatting is a little weird sometimes, so you have to clean it up to make it all look good. So antegrade amnesia, that's our topic. Desirable anesthetic endpoints is achieved at lower anesthetic concentrations, about 0.25 MAC than those required for unconsciousness. So when I read this, I'm going to read antegrade amnesia, and then I'm going to see anesthetic concentrations. I want to remember lower. That's the number I want in the back of my mind when I read that. So I'm going to hit Command Shift C and make that a C1 close. So I'm going to read this, and well, I'll show you at the end once we make it. Anesthetic concentrations about Command Shift Option C, because I want these to all be the same card, MAC. Then those required for unconsciousness, we'll leave that about 0.5 MAC, and this is going to be Command Shift Option C. Okay, these are all C1, C1, C1. Okay. Another thing I like to do is I know there's a really cool picture up here. So I'm going to Command Shift 4 make a screenshot, two finger, save to clipboard, come over here, put it right there. Okay, so we made this card. I'm doing this after class on a topic that I'm not super confident in, maybe, or something I'm trying to flesh out. So I just made this card. We're going to hit Command Enter, and it's now going to be created. So we're going to go back here, and let's see what it looks like. Okay, so if you remember correctly, we made these all C1s. So pure-grade amnesia, one of the core desirable anesthetic endpoints, is achieved at lower anesthetic concentrations, about 0.25 MAC, than those required for unconsciousness, about 0.5 MAC. Let's see if we got it right. Lower 0.25, zero point 0.5. And now I have this picture here on the back as a reference that I can look at and try and remember also. Okay. We can change this if we want and make these C2s and make two cards out of this. So I changed that to two, enter, and let's see what happens. Okay, see what happened here? Anterior grade amnesia, one of those core desirable anesthetic endpoints, is achieved at a lower anesthetic concentration. It's showing us this because this is our C1, okay? Lower anesthetic concentrations, about 0.25 MAC than those required for unconsciousness, 0.5 MAC, and we got it right. So now, okay, we have two cards out of this. I would leave it at one. I'm just doing this to show you how you can do that. And eventually we're going to get, like I showed you earlier, an empty card that we will just suspend. Okay, so this is really the bare bones how to make cards. If you can get these down, this is really all you need to do. And as you make cards, you're going to make better cards. Just keep up at it. Your first ones are not going to be great. You'll learn how to best occlude things for yourself and what sort of things you want to delete with your close deletions. So hopefully that is helpful for getting started with making your cards. Okay, so finally, I'm just going to show you kind of how to interpret your stats. This right here is just an add-on into Anki. Don't really mess with it. You can find all this information elsewhere. Once you figure out how to use the app, then you can look into that. But you can find that in here in your settings. So open up stats. It defaults to say to deck information. We just want to look at collection. Okay. And today I did 120 cards, 39 minutes, 19 seconds a card. Um, that tells you that. And I'm 100% on my mature cards that have been mixed in. Okay, this is kind of ugly here. This is not ideal. This is showing you your cards that you're going to be doing in the next few days. So to stay on track today, I'm going to have to do 227 cards, okay? And then tomorrow I'll have at least 156 cards due, but if I don't do any today, I'm going to have 380 due. If I don't do anything today and tomorrow, I will have 501 cards due. So, okay, this is your little hotspot. This shows you how many cards you've been doing in previous days. So you can see last semester there were some days that I did. Where's that? Oh, here it is. Last semester I had a day where I did like 1,233. I don't recommend that. Not fun. Now that we're in clinical, I'm averaging. Well, let's see. We're averaging 310 reviews per each day that I study. Okay, but if we go back 3 months to the fall, um, you can see that that average went up significantly. So, show you again here, this, or we'll put on the year here. In the fall, we had so much content we were going through each day, but we weren't in clinical. So you can see just how much more, how it was almost double, it seems, than I'm doing now. Right? And so it's going to change each semester. But this is showing your daily reviews. The green are young cards that you've learned, red, ones that you had to relearn, like you previously knew it and then you forgot it, so you had to learn it again. And the dark green over here are your mature ones. So you can see that about halfway through the semester, I really started accumulating these mature cards that I was answering with 30-day intervals. Okay, and that is the key to Anki here if you don't want to study for finals because all of that information is right here. But it takes, look at how long it took me. It took me half the term to get that stuff locked in. But I was only spending 20, 30 minutes a day tops working on this old information, which to me, I would rather do that than have to spend hours and days studying right before finals. Okay, this just shows you all of your cards. So right now I have a total of 2,100 cards, and we're about halfway through the term. So this is also, of note, card count, not notes. So I might have a card with, or a note with 6 occlusions on it or something. So that would be 6 cards. Um, look at these too much. This just shows you your when you're doing cards during the day. So when I'm looking at a year, I was doing a lot in the morning. But you can see in the last month, now that I'm in clinical, a lot of my cards are getting done between 4 and 8 p.m. Okay, and then this is just your true retention. This is always interesting to look at after you take an exam. So you look at in the last month, my actual retention has been 88.5%. Um, so it's interesting to compare this to what you scored on the exam. And if you're scoring much, like significantly better than your actual retention on here, that means you can drop the retention in Anki and lower your daily card load. But that's really all that is for. So hopefully this just kind of explains the stats. As you get more familiar with the app, this will all make more sense to you and you'll be able to make adjustments and interpret these. But the main thing is just learning how to do the cards, how to make the cards and make good cards. Well, thank you for watching. I hope this was a helpful, kind of just very bare bones explanation of how you can get started using Anki in anesthesia school. And, I would really encourage you to try this if you are new in your program or you just got admitted to a program and you're looking into things before you start. Also, I would suggest reading the book Make It Stick. If you are one of my classmates watching this, then you are intimately aware with that book and may or may not have written a book report on it. I will also post the outline that I used for making this video below, so you can follow along on paper, take some notes, and then I'll also have screenshots of my specific presets. So you're going to need to make your own settings eventually, but this will at least give you somewhere to start, so you can start reviewing cards. If you have questions, want some clarification, or maybe you are more familiar with Anki than me and notice that I explained something incorrectly or have some tips, post that below, and maybe we can make this video a hub of using Anki in CRNA school specifically because there aren't a whole lot of videos out there. Um, Lastly, I run a small sticker store. I'll link it below if you want some anesthesia-related stickers. Go ahead and check it out. Everything you buy there, the profits I donate to my class's graduation fund. So you'll be helping us buy a nice champagne toast at graduation, which is unfortunately many moons in our future. Um, Lastly, please do not like this video and do not subscribe to my channel. I am personally quite ashamed to be the first YouTuber out of my class, out of my cohort. Um, so yeah, please, thank you for watching the video, but do not support these shenanigans.